Hello and welcome to this video presentation of B4B from Professional Advantage. B4B is a bank interface solution providing you with a direct interface between the payables processes within your accounting solution and the import facilities provided by your bank for the upload of a batch of payment instructions. B4B is easy to use, quick to deploy, and highly scalable with a real focus on security, control, and audit, giving you a standardized payment process across your entire organization, wherever you may have a presence and whichever bank you use. With an extensive library of over 500 approved bank formats, B4B is the #1 choice when it comes to bank interface software. This allows you to make any payment to any beneficiary, no matter where they are, through whichever bank you use and via whatever payment type is supported in a secure and controlled fashion. An intuitive and easy to use 5-step process in B4B is the same regardless of your accounting solution or the bank that you're sending payment instructions to. So we generate the batch of payments first within your accounting solution. We can then validate that batch in B4B, matching those payment instructions to bank details for your creditors. We will then move that payment batch into the bank format, ready for inclusion in a bank file. That bank file is then securely created. That bank file can be encrypted. That bank file can also be securely transmitted directly to your bank. Normal approval will then be applied within your banking platform to review and authorize those payments and execute the funds transfer. And then the final step in B4B is we can send a batch of remittances directly to your creditors to notify them of the invoices that have been settled. Okay, a quick look at the complete end-to-end payables process from Microsoft Dynamics Great Plains through B4B to create a bank file ready for submission directly to your banking platform. So let's start off by entering a payables transaction. So I'm just going to put in here a euro transaction to this creditor Ace Travel, and we'll post that transaction. So now we can build the batch within Great Plains for that transaction to pay it. So I'll give it a batch ID. The origin is a computer check. And then here in the batch comment field, I'm going to put in a batch identifier that will be used within B4B. The payment method is EFT. I'm going to select the checkbook that I want to pay from and the currency selection for this batch of payments, which I'm going to set to euro. We can now build that batch of payments within Great Plains. One thing for the integration to B4B is we want to ensure that our payment output from Great Plains is per invoice rather than creditor. We can do that at the vendor option. In this case, I'm just going to override and do it for all here. And we'll build the batch and we should see my payment has been selected. So let's go ahead and process that. And we'll process, and I'm just going to discard these reports. So Great Plains has now posted that payment, and we're now going to use the generate EFT file within GP to produce an output that B4B is then going to automatically consume. So here's my €1 payment, and I'll generate an EFT file. That's going to create a file in a designated folder in a prescribed format specifically for use by B4B, and B4B will then automatically consume that. So if I launch B4B here from my GP dashboard, it's going to log me in using my Windows credentials, and it's going to route me directly to the landing page where I need to be to then validate this batch of payments. And you can see here is my transaction immediately ready in B4B for validation, for matching to the bank details that are maintained within the B4B application. So no errors, no warnings to address. My payment has been successfully validated. I save that for format processing. Then I simply create my bank file. So here I'm going to put in some runtime parameters for this file creation. So I'll put in the debtor name. I'll give it this a file name. Some other options here around SEPA payment processing. And then we create our output. And here on our final report from B4B, our create bank file listing, it's showing us exactly the payments that were included in that bank file and where that file has been written to. And in this case, you can see that my bank file has been output directly to my banking platform via a secure file transfer process. So here our output location, I've set to be our internal SFTP portal. So if I just log in here using my SFTP account, we can then see my bank file here has been written to that designated location via a secure file transfer process. So we can just download this file locally just so that I can then show you the content. Because here we can see that that flat XML file has been encrypted using PGP protocol, giving us the most secure and robust form of file transfer. Last step in B4B would be to create a remittance document that we could then email directly through to the supplier to notify them of that invoice that's been settled. And here's an example remittance that's provided with B4B. So as we've seen, B4B goes a long way to reduce the risk of fraud with a definable security matrix, enforcing segregation of duties, approval workflows that we're going to look at shortly. We saw that there's bank file encryption and the ability to securely transmit the file directly to your banking platform where your bank supports it. And further to that, a full audit trail within B4B. Auditing automatically changes to that sensitive information, namely the bank details. So one of the key concepts within B4B is the maintenance of all of your beneficiary bank details. So B4B has an extensive library of bank formats to provide you with a global banking solution. And each of those formats will have differing bank detail requirements based on the type of payment that's being made. And within B4B, the bank detail forms are tailored for that particular country, that bank, or that payment type to ensure all the necessary bank details are maintained for that beneficiary to execute that particular type of payment. So here I'm just going to launch B4B from my GP dashboard. This time I'm using named authentication to log into B4B with a user and a password. And I'm going to log in here as a bank detail user. So this user is assigned to a particular operator group, and that operator group has access to particular functions within the application. So if I move into the bank detail maintenance function here, we can see all of the bank details within B4B for our creditors, in this case for executing European SEPA payments. And the user is presented with a form that's specific to that particular type of payment within that particular country and bank. And the bank details are validated on entry to B4B to ensure that all of the mandatory data items have been collected and to ensure that the data is valid. So if I was to make a mistake when entering this IBAN, for example, you can see B4B complains. It's validating the IBAN structure for a German IBAN, and of course it doesn't match. If I make another mistake when entering this IBAN number, you can see here a different message is returned, showing me that the checksum is invalid. So B4B natively understands this stringent validation around IBANs, around bit codes, and other requirements for this particular type of payment. If I was to make a change to this bank record and save it within B4B, you can see here now it's triggering an approval workflow. So we can apply an optional approval process around the maintenance of what is very sensitive data within the application. And here it's prompting me to enter a reason as to why I'm making a change to this particular record. So now when I commit this change, B4B will automatically send an email notification to our designated approver or approvers to notify them that there is a change request pending their attention. And you can see here the status of this record is now pending approval. So if I was to try and make a payment to Ace Travel, then B4B is going to reject that because something's been changed and it needs to be approved first. So let's log back into B4B as a different named user. This time I'm going to log in as my approver, who is assigned to a different operator group within the application and has access to different functions. So here we can see that this user has the ability to view those bank details. And here's the record that's been changed. And this user also has access to the approval portal. So if we move into that approval portal, here we can see the information that's pending the approver's attention, and then they can make their approval decision. If we choose to reject the change request The approver will be prompted to enter a reason as to why they're rejecting. That will be relayed via an email alert back to the originator, and the record will remain locked until further action has been performed. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and approve the changes to the bank record. So that then clears out my approval grid. It will notify the originator via an email alert that their change request has been approved and that record has been unlocked and can then be used in a payment process. If I change the banking format here within B4B to a UK Barclays format, you'll see that when we look at the bank detail requirements, the user is presented with a different screen. So different bank detail information required for executing a UK payment through Barclays compared to that we saw when processing European payments. So tailored forms, stringent format-specific validation to ensure that all of your bank details are maintained correctly and also approved to ensure that the information is the correct data. So let's take a quick look at some of those administration options within B4B on how we can enforce those controls and segregation of duties within the application. The B4B application is highly scalable and highly configurable to ensure the setup meets your business requirements. There's obviously a real focus around security and control. We're dealing with very sensitive information, bank details, payment instructions, and so on. And so within our administration functions, you can see here, there are a number of options to enforce that control, approval workflows, segregation of duties, and so on. So we can see here we can enforce an approval workflow at the individual company or business unit level with email notifications. And this approval is around changes to the bank details that are maintained within the B4B application for each creditor based on the country, the bank, or the payment type that's being used. And having this approval workflow enabled just gives you that extra layer of control around the maintenance of the very sensitive data. If we consider our segregation of duties within the application, then B4B has an operator group maintenance function where we can create any number of operator groups where we can control access at the business unit or company level, and then within that business unit or company, what bank formats can be used, and then within that combination of company and bank format, what functions members of that operator group can actually perform. So we can set up administrator groups, we can set up groups for maintaining bank details, we can set up groups for approving bank details, and we can set up groups for payables users as well. And of course, this is highly configurable, so any number of groups, combinations of roles can be achieved natively within the application. Another key security feature within B4B is the ability to encrypt the bank file at the point of creation using PGP protocol. This is very much dependent on the receiving bank as to whether they can decrypt the file, but the functionality is there in B4B so that when the file is created in memory, it's then encrypted using PGP protocols to ensure that that file is secure and cannot be tampered with in any way. Further to that, B4B also has an SFTP client built in, and this allows direct transmission of the bank file at the point of creation through an SFTP channel directly to the receiving bank. So with the use of the SFTP file transmission, there is no file being written to the physical disk. The file is created in memory and then transmitted directly through the SFTP process. So all bank details must be maintained within the B4B application. And this is to ensure that the correct information is maintained for each beneficiary, for each creditor, based on the country, the bank, the type of payment that's going to be executed. And within the B4B library of over 500 bank formats, each of those bank detail forms is tailored for that particular type of payment through that bank within that particular country. So here we're currently using a Lloyds link bank format. And if we take a look at the bank detail setup for the creditors, our standard bank details here, you can see the user is presented with a form to capture the relative information for that particular bank format, and in this case, for a particular payment type as well. So here's a bank detail record for a domestic BACS payment using the Lloyds format. And of course, if we change this to a different payment type, you'll see that the form is dynamic, and based on that changed payment type, there are different bank detail requirements. So for an international payment, we have the option of entering an IBAN or an account, a bit code or a clearing code, and so on. And you can see how that information is now being validated both at the field level and also at the record level based on the payment type that's been selected. If I was to change my banking format and we were to have a look at a different format, so let's have a look here at a US ACH bank module. And now we're looking at the standard bank details for our beneficiaries using this US ACH format. You'll see that again, the user is presented with a completely different form, different fields, different requirements for executing an ACH payment in the US compared to an international payment through Lloyds. So segregation of duties, approval workflow, PGP encryption at file creation, SFTP transfer of that output file directly to your bank, and full audit reporting within B4B ensures all your reference data is fully controlled and audited within the B4B application and is ultimately very secure. And that key bank detail information is also obfuscated when written to the database. So there's no free text and exposed bank details held within the back end within B4B. So why choose B4B? Well, as we've seen, there's a real focus on security and audit, bank file encryption, secure file transfer protocol, all of the things that you would expect from a bank interface solution. And this is why over 5,000 users currently benefit from using B4B to make their payments globally in a secure and controlled fashion. Okay, so one final look then at the complete end-to-end payables process. So let's start by entering a new transaction here into Great Plains. I'm just going to use a different creditor this time, so we'll use advanced. And here I'm going to do a UK invoice. So I'll put in my invoice number, let's put in our value, and we'll simply post that transaction. So next up, we're going to build that batch of payments. And this, I'm going to give a batch ID. Our origin is a computer check, and here I'm going to give it a batch comment. Our payment method is EFT. Let's select the checkbook I'm going to pay from and the currency that I want to select for this batch. And then we'll go ahead and build that batch. I'm going to set this option to one payment per invoice, and then we can build the batch, and we'll see here that my UK payment has been selected. So I'm going to go ahead and process, and we'll pay that transaction. And I'm just going to discard the reports. So there's GP's posted that EFT transaction. Our final step is to generate our output file that then will be passed directly into B4B through the integration layer. So let's generate that EFT file. Let's launch B4B. And here's my batch ready for validation. So we can see the transaction details that we posted in Great Plains, the invoice number, the value, the creditor. It's been successfully matched to the bank details for that creditor that are held within B4B. No errors, no warnings, so I can simply save that into my bank module, ready for inclusion in a bank file. So I'm just going to change to my UK format, and we'll go into the create bank file function. And it's here that we can see that one invoice ready for inclusion in our bank file. So a different set of runtime parameters that we saw against the European SEPA format earlier. So here I'm just going to enter my runtime parameters again. So I'll put in the debtor name. Let's put in my payment reference here. So I'm going to use the same reference that I used within the batch comment in GP. And then finally, my file name. And we can then create our output file. So here's our final payment report from B4B showing us that the invoice posted to Advanced Office Systems has been included in a bank file, this time for Santander multi-BACS. And here you can see my output file this time has been written to a designated output folder on my local machine, ready for upload, in this case to Santander. Final stage then would be to look at the remittance. So let's find that batch. You can see I have a number of batches pending remittance. And here's my transaction. So let's have a look at that remittance document, which we can then send directly out to advanced office systems to notify them of the invoice that's been settled. So if you require any further information on B4B or any of our other software solutions, please check out our website at www.professionaladvantage.co.uk.